And outspeak brave Horatius, the captain of the gate. To every man upon this earth death cometh soon or late. And how can man die better than facing fearful odds? For the ashes of his fathers and the temples of his gods.
Blake, these two are going to eat you out of house and home, Marisol said. Blake did not reply. He just nodded in agreement. Sebakira had gotten into the refrigerator and found something that made her very happy. The food in this world has such multi-layered flavors and is very delicious, the lioness declared, flicking her tail back and forth as she ate in a very sloppy fashion. Sebakira, that's a turkey, Blake said. A raw, uncooked turkey. We were saving that for a family get-together. Sebakira sank her claws into what remained of the turkey. Yes, you are a most gracious host for sharing such a wonderful bounty with us, Sebakira said through a mouthful of turkey meat. Aisling tried to say something, but her mouth was full. That's a salad, Marisol giggled. Aren't you even going to put any dressing on it? Dressing? Aisling replied curiously, grabbing a handful of cold spinach leaves right out of the refrigerator and stuffing them in her mouth. Marisol shook her head. Blake, if we live through this, promise me that you'll write more food into your books. Consider it done, Blake replied. I don't think I wrote a single food-related thing in either of their stories, so these ladies have only known gray goo, if that. While the group waited for Callie's arrival, Blake's father pulled Marisol aside and started asking questions about her personal life. It felt very much like the type of conversation Marisol might have if she was meeting her boyfriend's father for the first time. She gave JD a quick rundown of her life story, starting with the death of her father. When I was 1 year old, my father went off to war, Marisol explained. There were Islamist rebels in the south, trying to take Mindanao Island and break away from the Philippines to make their own country. The war went for almost 50 years. My father went to Mindanao and fought terrorists all the time. He was only home for a little while, then he had to go again. He got killed when I was 6. Blake brewed some hot cocoa and served it to the group, making sure to give Aisling a smaller serving as she was rapidly eating her way through all of the sweets in the house. Then he sat down to listen. My mom, my sister, my brother, and I all started working. We had to bring in as much money as we could so we didn't lose our apartment. Mama, Mariposa, and I all got into the hospitality service. My brother's still too young to get a full-time job anywhere, so Mama and I bring in most of the money. What do you do for work? JD asked. I'm an air stewardess, Asiana Airlines, Marisol replied. I'm the only one in my family without a criminal record, so flying out of the country is easy for me. JD tried to press her for more information, asking about how she met Blake, but Marisol did not go into further explanations. Instead, she said she was uncomfortable and needed some fresh air. Amidst the general chaos of the past few hours, Marisol had somehow managed to keep hold of her skateboard. She felt naked, riding around without a helmet or protective pads, but it was still a good way to relieve stress. Blake's house was at the top of a small hill, so Marisol was able to lose herself for a few minutes, rolling through the darkened street. Even though it was late at night, only 2 street lamps were illuminated. Again, Marisol found the darkness of a Michigan night to be overwhelming. "What's that down there?" a soft voice called out. Aisling was sitting on the branches of a tree in Blake's front yard, kicking her feet and looking like a much smaller child than what Marisol had seen previously. She pointed to a building at the end of the street. "It's bigger than Ulster Castle," Aisling remarked. "That's the local high school," Marisol replied. "Blake said he lived close to it." "Schools are huge in this world," Aisling sounded awestruck. I wonder what the castles are like. Why are you out here? Marisol asked. I saw a cat through the window. Now I can't find him. Probably a local stray, Marisol replied. Aisling shape-shifted into a squirrel, sniffing the air intensely. Marisol looked back at the house. She could see through the front window. Blake and Sebakira were in the living room. He was holding a laptop computer and reading aloud. Marisol took a few steps closer and strained her ears to listen. Blake was reading aloud from one of his previous stories. All of the Stormbreakers cheered at their own success, all except Varian, who had a look of dawning realization on her or his face. Hey Nainu, Varian said. Were you sensing psionic energy during all of that? Nainu nodded. The whole time. Varian's eyes went wide. Then he, or she, turned around and started walking towards a nearby tree. It was still on fire and dropping hot embers as though they were autumn leaves. Before anyone could react, Varian reached out and grabbed the tree trunk, putting their entire hand and wrist into the flames, and pressing their palm against the hot embers. Varian, what are you doing? Quarter screamed. It's not real, Varian muttered. Fire's not real. The whole thing's fake. As soon as Varian said the words, the illusion was shattered for the other Stormbreakers. Instantly, the forest fire vanished. The air became cool, and down in the valley, the Stormbreakers could see that Hayat and her followers were still trapped in the illusion of a wildfire. They cried out for Jericho to save them from a non-existent threat, and one of the acolytes waved his arms about as though his clothes were on fire. Sebakira narrowed her eyes, deep in thought. But then, something happened. Blake raised his voice in alarm. Oh, what's happening here? Marisol could not see the screen of Blake's laptop, but she could see the blue light suddenly appear in his face. She ran forward and banged her fists on the window. Blake, she yelled, drop it! Another character's coming out! A rushing sound caught Marisol's attention, and she turned around just in time to see what was happening. Just like back in her hotel room, a translucent disc had appeared in mid-air, looking not unlike a wormhole from Stellaris. 2 people fell out of the vortex portal, which quickly began to shrink. Both of the newcomers failed to stick the landing and collapsed in the grass. Blake and Sebakira ran out into the yard. Blake was clutching his musket in both hands, covering the new arrivals, while Sebakira turned her attention to the rapidly shrinking portal. If it worked in the Stormbreakers, Sebakira said aloud. Then she pulled one arm back, motioning as though she was going to throw something. A shimmering purple rod appeared in her paw. It was a psionic lance, a construct of telekinetic energy that could be used to harm an enemy. Sebakira hurled the psi lance with all her might, and the bolt sailed into the vortex portal. Just as the portal closed and vanished, Sebakira raised her hackles and let out a deep growl. I hit someone, she said. I could feel it. Both of you stay down, Blake yelled at the newcomers. I could see your concealed weapons. Don't try anything. Marisol, get their guns. The girl has a gun in her vest, right side. The guy has a gun in his waistband. Or, girl. Or is it... fuck, it's you! Marisol approached the woman first. She was very small, almost the same size as Aisling when the fairy was in human shape. She had white skin and pointed ears that immediately made Marisol think about elves from The Lord of the Rings. And most noticeable of all, this woman had 2 tattoos. On her face, just where her left eyebrow should have been, there was a narrow symbol instead. And on the woman's right inner forearm, Marisol could see the number 0214, tattooed in a very similar style to the tattoos found on Holocaust survivors. Marisol quickly found the plasma pistol in the woman's vest and took it, alarmed by how heavy it was. That, Blake said, is Mina Soban Ray. She's the deuteragonist and love interest from a Cold War affair. I wrote her a couple years back. You know me, Mina Soban Ray said, the Hagaran language somehow instantly converting to English as the words left her mouth. You're the author that alien told us about. Marisol and Blake turned their attention to the other person, and Marisol hesitated, unsure if she was dealing with a man or a woman. This confusion caused Marisol to quickly figure out the stranger's identity. "And you must be Varian Robinson," Marisol said. She reached down and grabbed a Gauss pistol out of Varian's waistband. "Or should we just skip all that and just call you Victoria?" Varian Robinson was a young adult, just 19 years old. He, or she, had a messy mop of black hair, caramel-colored skin, vaguely Asian features, and a highly androgynous body type, which made it impossible to tell at a glance whether Varian was male or female. Marisol had read The Last Heroes 1 year ago. She knew that while Varian presented outwardly as androgynous, the character was secretly transgender and planning to embrace their true identity as a woman named Victoria. However, Marisol's casual use of the name caused Varian to react badly. This meant she was dealing with an earlier version of the character. "How do you know that name?" Varian asked in a panicked voice. "That's supposed to be secret." "Maybe we should refrain from spoiling their stories," Blake recommended. "It's bad enough we somehow managed to draw a member of the Robinson family. I'm just glad it wasn't Chihiro, or God forbid, Blake himself." Then he aimed his musket at Varian. Marisol knew Blake was bluffing. Neither of these characters had psionic powers, meaning they could not be affected by the homemade anti-psionic weapon. Even so, Marisol put her hands on her hips and tried to make herself look intimidating, tilting her head so the glare of the streetlights would reflect in her glasses. "Let me guess," Blake said. "A blue-skinned alien told you I'm the guy who created your worlds and that you should kill me." "Something like that," Varian replied. Marisol noticed that Varian was speaking English from the outset. Her, or his, words matched their mouth movements. Varian jerked their head at Mina. "This one was all on board the plan to kill you. But then I saw who that Malum guy was working with, and I knew I would jump ship as soon as he sent us through the gate." Mina shot a glare at Varian. Marisol knew that if she was not being held at gunpoint, Mina would have attacked Varian in that moment. "Hold on, who is Malum working with?" Blake asked. "I know about Kiri and Tenna." Blake looked up at Marisol. "Didn't you say something about Akira, too?" Marisol nodded. "Yeah, Akira's here," she replied. Varian's eyes narrowed. "I'm supposed to be killing Akira, not working with her," she, or he, responded. "I'm not doing anything she wants, okay? I'm not going to hurt you guys, but the Higaran chick? We're at war with Higara anyway. Might as well waste her." Mina flinched at how casually Varian suggested killing her. "Your world is at war with Higara," Marisol interjected. "Not this one. Now, who's Malum working with? Tell us, and we'll let you out of the cold." Varian turned to Blake. "You look like a younger version of my grandpa," Varian said. "He's a fictional version of me," Blake replied. "Same name, same face. I wrote myself into the stories. Happy? Now tell me who Malum's working with already." A half smile crossed Varian's features. "Akira, obviously. Then there's a human called Ishka. Tenna, she's a humanoid, can't miss her, red hair. 2 aliens, a brother and a sister. There's also an older version of Nezi's sister, Cassandra. A Partogan called Vetu, who's just naked all the time and no one seems to care. And Mina's boyfriend." "Kiri," Mina said. "His name's Kiri." Blake lowered his musket. "We're up shit creek without a paddle," Blake remarked. "Marisol, Aisling, let's get these 2 inside. Try to make some sense out of this catastrophe." Just before Marisol stepped through the front door, she noticed one of Blake's neighbors standing on the front porch of her house, watching the scene play out with a cell phone to her ear. "Okay, so, for the both of you, in your plot, this place would be considered the past. But this isn't time travel. You've figured that out, haven't you? Blake was trying to gauge just how much Mina and Varian knew about the situation. Aisling took an interest in Mina's tattoos while Sebakira was silently reading Varian's mind with a curious expression on her face. Varian was motivated to join Blake and Marisol's side simply because Akira was on the opposing side. Mina, however, was not swayed. "You're the reason I can't be with Kiri," she said, narrowing her eyes at Blake. "I can't forgive you for using my love life to entertain a bunch of strangers." "Kiri?" JD asked. "Her love interest," Blake replied. "The guy who showed up in Shia Town when Tenna confronted us." JD put his hand on Blake's shoulder. "Well, if you can't be with him, why not consider this young man?" Blake shot an angry look at his father, who seemed to be enjoying his time as a wild card. Mina gripped her right arm tightly, covering up the ID number tattooed there. "I don't date humans," she replied in a voice full of suppressed hatred. "Are you done trying to get me killed?" Blake snapped. "Look, Mina, sorry to do this, but this situation is just too dangerous. If you're going to remain hostile, I'm gonna have to detain you." "Detain?" Aisling repeated. "That means we're going to take her prisoner," Sebakira quickly explained. Then she looked at Blake. "You don't need to leave the room to gather zip ties. Allow me." A pulse of telekinetic energy rippled out of Sebakira. A moment later, several plastic zip ties flew through the air, emerging from the basement, and gently placed themselves in Blake's hands. Mina narrowed her eyes at Sebakira. "Right, hands behind your back, Mina," Blake said. "I promise no one's going to hurt you, but we need to keep ourselves safe." Right at that moment, all of the lights went out. The house fell silent as the electric power was shut off. "A blackout," Varian said. As if in reply, there was a tinkle of breaking glass. Something had just smashed the living room window. Marisol looked around and spotted a small cylindrical object on the floor. "What is that?" she asked. Blake looked down, then screamed, "Flashbang!" Suddenly, the world was full of light and noise. Marisol was dazzled and barely noticed as she fell over, blind and deaf. Someone jumped on top of her and forced Marisol to roll over onto her belly. Cold metal closed around her wrists, pinning her hands behind her back. A moment later, Marisol regained the ability to hear. She could just perceive a woman's voice saying, "Calm down, everyone. This is for your own safety. My name is Cali D'Kara, and this is my Go team. We're from Paradox Interactive, and we're here to help."